Yo, what is up, party people? This is Harry and Jen do horror with friends. I am supremely hyped about our episode for today, which analyzes the hell out of a little movie called Stopmotion from 2023, directed by Robert Morgan. Before we get into it, I want to take a minute to thank everyone for your incredible support by giving ratings and reviews on your streaming platforms. It seems like our recent episodes on the Scream series have been interesting to people, and we are hoping to keep it going. In June, we're going to have an episode on Late Night with the Devil. Later on, we're going to get to other movies like Immaculate and the new and old Nosferatu. Those are also on the agenda. Very exciting. If those movies are interesting to you, if you are also excited, you want to hear some insight on them, go on, give us a follow on your podcast streamer of choice. You can also find us on Insta and Facebook and email us with recs and requests at harryandjenpodcast@gmail.com. As always, please remember to rate and review the show if you have a moment. All right, let's get weird and talk about stop motion.
If I could ask something unprecedented, could I take a quick bathroom break?
Oh my God, me too. Awesome. Hi, everybody. I am Harry Nichols. I am a singer-songwriter. I am an English teacher. I am coming from a gig where I stopped playing music 49 minutes ago. So I finished my gig and I threw my guitar down and I ran up to the bar and I was like, "Pay me!" Then I hopped in my car and I was like, "I gotta go." So I guess.
Also, I hope you brought your guitar home with you.
I did, yes. I remembered to grab all my gear. It was a fun gig where my whole family was involved, and so I put my kids to work and I made them pack up my cables and all that shit, and we just threw things in the car and drove away.
That's what they're there for, right?
Exactly. That's why I had kids. I mean, that's that's
roadies.
Who needs roadies?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I'm Jen Lightfoot, and I am an artist and tattoo artist, and I'm pretty sure I walked into a spider web as I was setting up. Yep, disgusting. And
I hate that experience.
So gross, and I don't
especially
know
if it's in your hair or something like that.
And I don't know where the spider is or maybe went.
And because you inevitably imagine that it's on you.
Yes, yeah. So if I freak out somewhere in the middle of the episode, we found the spider. And then one thing I never mention about myself is that I am also a musician. I don't really play live, but I like recording things. And I recently remastered, in quotations, older recording from 2010 and just put it on Spotify and Apple Music and all those things. And I say it in quotations because a lot of the original tracks died with a computer. So best I could do with what I had left.
So did you re-record stuff or did you just put out what was left? I see. Okay.
I just put out what was left, and one of the issues when I recorded it was all the vocals came out of one headphone and not the other. So
that's like Beatles style.
Right on. And my name is Michael Jen. I am so grateful to you, Jen and Harry, for having me as a guest on your show here. I will say I've had the, privilege of seeing Jen perform live. So that's BS that you don't perform live. So just putting that out there.
It's been 10 years.
I am probably your first and maybe last guest who works in the pharmaceutical industry. And I feel obligated to disclose that all the views tonight are my own, do not represent my company at all. If you have any questions about the pharmaceutical industry, I'm happy to take it offline. But essentially, I work in medical safety. So if you think of clinical trials, I protect patients, think about side effects, all that sort of stuff. I'm a science geek at heart. But in a past life, I did study English literature in college, and I can't believe it's been more than 10 years, but I have participated in podcasts that talk about films. So Full
So
circle.
you're a man of experience. Yes. So can I ask how, Mike? So Jen reached out to you. How do you both know each other?
I actually, it's another interesting connection here. So I know you teach high school English,
I
and
do.
that was a formative moment for myself and Tegan, who is my best friend and Jen's partner. We met in 11th grade English class and formed a friendship. So take those seating arrangements seriously. They're life
Yeah,
altering.
clearly. Wow, and I teach English 11 too. So
Oh
that's
shit.
So yeah, through that I met Jen, and I guess if you're saying it's 10 years ago that I saw you perform live, it's been a while. Um,
It
and
sounds like too long. Like 10 years. Like just sounds like a weird thing.
yeah, it sounds like it should put us back in the 90s, but
Yeah.
it's not that long ago.
Mm.
Um,
No.
I'm not into it personally. I'm not into it. I'm not into how thinking about 10 years ago is like a very distinct and memorable like time in my life.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, 10 years ago, I was still an adult. What? No.
Oh, gross. Time is passing, y'all. Time is passing quickly. Which maybe is a convenient segue to our movie. Right? Today we are talking about Stop Motion, uh, this bizarre film that combines stop motion animation and live action. Um, so, Mike, I'm so sorry to say that we often make our guests summarize the movie, and this is a bear to summarize. So, good luck.
oh no, I'm well aware of this, and I actually wrote something down, so it might sound less off the cuff. But I wrote it myself. No chat GPT or anything. So it begins, or as I would say, as the title suggests, Stop Motion is a film about stop motion animation.
Mhm.
We follow Ella Blake, who, of course, is the daughter of famous stop motion animator Suzanne Blake. Of course. Ella navigates defining her unique voice in stop motion animation, independent of her mother and her clique of friends who have sold out and created stop motion animation for the commercial masses. The
Mhm.
film heavily features a variety of ASMR type inputs to heighten a visually artistic film that cleverly blends transitions through time and space, providing alternatingly real and or distorted versions of events as the plot hurdles Ella along in completing her very own stop motion film within a film. But at what cost?
Nice.
That was great.
Oh man, that's like the
Yeah, this
most
is a hard movie to summarize, so that was that was awesome.
It says nothing, but I mean, it's basically that's what came to mind.
No, I have nothing. I mean, so full spoilers are allowed, right? Like I think
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
worth pointing out that like, it doesn't end well for Ella.
No, no.
Right?
No.
And something I also think we should say is just that like it's like because it might help us to do some of our analysis or it might come up and be relevant was just that like it seemed like Ella, the daughter of the famous stop motion animator, it seemed like their relationship is very fraught
Yeah.
and she's very controlling and you can kind of extrapolate that there's like a real history of um, like micromanagement and like bordering on abuse, I think maybe.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't know. Just think like that's a little bit more of the like juice that I was kind of like paying attention to as well.
Mhm. And
Mhm.
she calls her puppet. Like she
She
refers to
calls her
her
puppet.
as.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I felt like some of that symbolism is really like over the top and hitting you over the head. It's like puppet, puppet, and they even have a
yeah.
line at one point where she talks about her like cutting her strings and putting her back in the box, and I'm like, all
Right,
right,
right, right.
that's fine. I get puppet, puppet, like that play on wording, but I think it's interesting also just the double entendre with the word poppet, right? Because it could be, you know, calling someone a young girl, innocence, themes like that. But also poppet is like the term for a voodoo doll. So like
Hmm.
I'm very intrigued kind of to what extent there's like a dark side or like ritualistic sacrificial. I don't think the film
Mm.
necessarily goes there, but I wonder if we could read into that in moments.
Yeah, I didn't know it meant like voodoo, like, or it was another.
Like the voodoo doll itself is called a puppet, and
Huh,
you stick pins in it, and voodoo.
Mm.
interesting.
Wow. Yeah, I actually didn't know that either. So the POPPET, that's the term for. Oh, see, that's interesting. I didn't know that either. But I think it's super appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and the
based
mother
on what
is
we see.
calling her the POPPET version.
Right. If
So
you're a subtitles watcher,
I am.
then I know
Totally.
you are, Jen. Yeah. All right. Well, so maybe we could dig into a little bit of the analysis here. What kinds of topics, themes, perspectives do we think that this movie reflects?
The thing I got from it was like fine art versus illustration, or like
Mm,
conceptual gallery art versus commercial art. So like
mm,
Tom's sister represents commercial art. I don't remember her name. Ella and her mother are fine art, and Tom, her boyfriend, represents what most of us are, which are artists who make our art, music, writing, etc., but also have to have a day job that's unrelated to our art.
right.
But we focus on Ella and her struggle of needing to have her own voice as a fine artist. And she also doesn't respect commercial art, but has the skill to do it. And having gone to art school, this is a fucking stupid feud between the art world of fine art and illustration. No one else like knows this. It's just, I think Mike, we probably talked about it before, but like it is like a stupid feud. But
I'm sorry, can I pause you? Can you
yeah,
so when you're saying fine art and illustration, can you
yeah,
just
it's
clearly define those
versus.
things for me?
Oh yeah, good point. So fine art would be like it's a tricky it's a tricky line because fine art technically is like gallery art, conceptual
Hmm.
art, abstract expressionism, um, you know, things that are maybe it's hard because yeah, some gallery art is representational, but commercial art is like you're making something for marketing, magazine, like back in the
Hmm.
day, like religious art, like it was for somebody, it was like a commission, it was like for
Hmm.
profit, essentially. Where
For the
like,
man.
yeah, exactly, yeah,
Yeah, I
for the
get it.
money, whereas like the other would not be, so
Gotcha.
like a lot of fine artists look down on illustrators, and a lot of illustrators will then look down on fine
Hmm.
artists, saying they don't have skill, which I
Gotcha.
might, someone who said that before.
And so the thing I guess I wasn't understanding is that
Mhm.
illustrators are commercial artists. Those are
Yes. Yeah.
synonymous.
So
Okay, gotcha.
illustrators are commercial artists, and then
Gotcha.
like
Okay.
fine art would be conceptual art.
Understood.
Yeah. As a very loose, vague definition. Um,
And why would you characterize the feud as stupid? Is it an artificial line, or is there a reality to it?
I think it's an artificial line because like there are fine artists, like people who don't make work for the man for profit that show in galleries or that are figurative. Um, I'm trying to think like of people and my brain is blanking and I can only think of the
Hmm.
most obscure fucking people at the moment.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, um, so yeah, I think it's kind of a stupid feud because I always feel like it's the fine artist, especially like shitting on commercial art and illustration,
Okay.
even though, and the one thing in art school is the illustration classes teach you, like, they're like, this is life drawing, this is perspective, this is like how to draw a skull. And fine art is like, feel your feelings and put it on the canvas. Oh,
Okay.
I'm doing like a hand motion of jerking off right now for anyone that can't
Mm.
see.
So tell me more then. So now that we've more clearly defined these things and understood this controversy, how do
Mhm.
you feel like it plays out
Like
in the movie? Where
in the
are we? Yeah.
movie. So I feel like a lot of the movie is about the struggle between the two art worlds. So wanting to make it as a fine artist or conceptual artist, gallery artist, but also struggling to find one's own voice or fearing that one doesn't have one or any ideas, because that's like the big thing with that. Like you have
Mm,
to be saying something often. So in the beginning, she and Tom are driving in the car, and he says, quote, don't you want to make your own films and find your own voice? And she says, quote, I don't have my own voice.
hmm
And then So this is a bit of a jump in my notes, but sort of related. The mother's stop animation story is where the Cyclops sees its own death.
Mhm.
And so I think that Ella's story, which I think also relates to wanting and not having her own voice, overlaps onto the mother's. So
Mm.
Ella tells the little girl, quote, it's about a Cyclops. She traded one eye with the gods to see her destiny, but she saw her own death. And then, in a way, Ella's story does a similar thing, but she, quote, I don't know why I'm saying this in quotes. No one says it in the movie. She trades her sanity in for a voice, which is the little girl
Mm.
and also her mother. And in the end, is shown her own death. Ella's story ends by seeing her own death when she walks into the house that was in her stop animation movie, which also looks very similar to her studio room. If you look at both, there's like a little window on the side. It's like all,
Mm.
and the little girl shows her her death on the computer, and then she goes in the box. And then, Mike, you were saying that quote from the mom, so I actually wrote it down. She says, "You can't control anything. You're a puppet caught in your own strings, and if it isn't
Right.
me playing them, it's somebody else." And when the puppets are done with their play, they're put back in their box. So her mother is almost like, in a way, playing like the gods in that way, like
Mm.
foreshadowing what will come. So yeah, I don't know. That's kind of what I have, but sorry that was long.
No, that's great. I mean, I thank you for bringing to my attention the like visual layout similarities between her apartment and the bungalow set, which is really cool, and I had not actually noticed, so that's really cool.
I didn't notice it on the first watch. I watched this movie twice. So
Yeah, as did I.
I have to say, in true procrastinator fashion, and maybe you're used to this, Harry, with a bunch of 11th graders, but I saved it for the night before. So you're getting my thoughts fresh,
Your
less than
raw
24
thoughts.
hours.
Bring them
the
on. Yeah.
best.
No, I love that you like what you just put together there, Jen. When she was touring that apartment, I at first felt like looked like a diorama or something. It looked like
Mm.
such like a set or something, but it makes sense because yeah, it totally echoes, what she creates as a set. Um, Different directions to go, kind of from what you laid out. One about art in general, but you really got into the details. So I want to think about storytelling. Like that was something that really emerged for me
Mhm.
in terms of kind of thinking about the mother's art and the stories it's telling is very much rooted in Greek mythology, right? She's talking about
Hmm.
Cyclops, and then someone else was like, "Oh, your mother made this great film about a Medusa," right? So it's like the very
Mm.
strong Greek kind of histories. And now we get Ella trying to find her more maybe modern voice a generation later. You're not doing the classics, but still it's like interwoven with this Little Red Riding Hood thing,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is strange because that's also historical and like I don't know how much of an own voice or what kind of spin she put on it. But like also thinking about these different kinds of formats of storytelling and mythology, from Greek to Grimm Brothers to when I saw a lot of the stop motion stuff, like these like clay, or I guess they're using mortician's wax objects, seem like out of like Jewish folklore, like a golem, like this
Mm.
monster that just
Hmm.
has like
Hmm.
a task to do. So trying to put those like different things together, whether it's like some kind of narrative arc over history or different ways of riffing on kind of common tales. It's in finding her own voice. It's very funny to me that Ella couldn't develop it and like relied on that little girl having to tell her the story
Mm.
and like revealing it like one chapter at a time, like a bedtime story.
Mhm. That's interesting about all the historical things in there.
Hmm.
'Cause I didn't think of the like Gollum either. Like that's fascinating.
Yeah. I love that you put together because so I think what you're referencing is like so there's this scene in the movie where she goes to work for the man for like a half a day, right? And and but it is such an interesting and revealing scene, right? You learn so much from it because there's this like nerd who like comes out and says like, "Yeah, I love your mom's work," right? With the Medusa, with that. In that we get not only that like her mother is a famous animator, but also that and what you picked up on that I did not, that she's like really heavily influenced by like Greek myth and all of these very like archetypal ways of putting things. Um yeah, and that is really interesting. I guess I wonder, what do you feel like the movie is do you feel like the movie is conveying something about those with those archetypes?
I mean, maybe it's like to get the magnitude of her mother's like, she has these mythic, epic
Hmm.
stories of Medusa and the Cyclops, whereas like Ella only has bedtime stories like Little Red Riding Hood, right?
Mm,
It kind of contextualizes her,
yeah.
infantilizes her almost in terms of point of view and relationship.
I like that. So thinking about like in that way, it sort of does illustrate for us that like Ella is not the artist that her mother is, right? Her mother has this sort of huge, sort of sweeping capability, like against which Ella's own artistry seems kind of infantile.
It's almost like stunted, and it's interesting
Hmm.
that
Mm,
like her vision is a little girl that's telling her the story. So a child
Hmm.
is actually the voice of her story.
And I think maybe maybe the implication there is that what has stunted that development is the relationship between those two women, right? Like the way that the mother has like completely domineered the relationship and prevented, her daughter from developing any sort of mature identity of her own, which is cool.
yeah,
Hmm.
definitely is some trauma there, and I'm wondering to what extent the film tries to unpack that without really, there are no flashbacks to her childhood, right? Everything is
Mm,
kind of in present time, but
hmm.
we're
Hmm.
piecing together that there's been something, right? Like,
Hmm.
I mean, but what about like part of, I guess, the film and what it tried to do is very disorienting, right? Reality versus not, but also like setting. Like we don't have a time, a place, like city, urban. Like we know like there are these spaces where the events occur, and then when she goes out and parties, like the drive home takes her to like the next morning, and then like how far does she live from? And I'm guessing it's Britain in some ways, so London or I don't know.
Yeah,
I
and she's
think
like in the woods at one point, taking dead animals.
right.
Mhm.
I think that disorienting experience serves to um it's almost a little bit in line with Mike, some of the things you've been bringing up. I think it serves to bring forward some of the sort of like abstract philosophical content that we're talking about here, right? We're trying to kind of divest um, ourselves from any sort of cultural time and place, and
Mhm.
instead really focus on really big philosophical questions, right? Questions about artistry, questions about mortality, questions about agency, so almost like in abstract of the like any sort of cultural or regional influences that might be involved with those. So I have, I mean, as usual for me, I went really hard.
Yeah. How many pages this time?
It's 2 3/4.
Not as long as Scream, but still
But
pretty.
but Jen, I should say that I had a really hard time pinning down. I wanted something put together and clear to say about this movie, and I struggled so hard. This movie is so bizarre and abstract and frankly a little slippery, I found
Hmm.
from an analysis perspective. I actually went I created 3 outlines. I
Are you
I
presenting all three tonight
No,
or
I am
just
not.
one?
I will not do that to you. Mike presumably wants to go to bed at some point.
No, I'd love to hear it because
No,
So only one outline is 2 3/4 pages. Three outlines
so
would be
so
like,
so the outline I have settled on slash just finally given up is 2 3/4 pages.
Harry, there's too much time on this. You gotta do what I do. 5 minutes
I
before the Zoom.
watch the
but
film the night before.
Yep,
I
yeah.
can't. Anyway, so I'd like to apologize to Vanavi, my student teacher, who I'm supposed to have been observing all of this time and commenting on her teaching work, and instead have been working on my outline for this podcast.
I mean, clearly this is more important, so.
I mean, clearly, I decided to just focus on the question of agency, okay, and whether or not we can really be in command of our own lives, right? So I think that by illustrating the art making process as one of passive obedience to externalized creative forces, I think this movie illustrates the human cost of following genuine inspiration and emphasizes the interrelationship between artists and their pain. Right. So, Jen, I'm so glad that you talked a little bit about like the fine art versus commercial art thing, because I think that this is like directly relevant. I think a lot of what influences that rivalry is like this sense of like making genuine art versus making art just kind of for the man, right?
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, genuine art requires kind of delving uncomfortable parts of yourself. Whereas, creating commercial art, that's all about just consumer demand, and you can make that without really treading into uncomfortable territory for yourself. Does that seem like it makes sense?
It makes
I
sense.
follow that.
I think that I think that commercial art or illustration, they're different. I shouldn't put those two together. Can be uncomfortable, but keep going.
And I'm not trying to say I support this. I'm trying to say I'm trying to like kind of chart some of the underlying
Mhm.
philosophies of those
Yeah.
things. What are some words that y'all would use to describe Ella as a person, as a character?
I'm just thinking because I have different takes on it, but I guess one of them is lacking in self-confidence, uh,
Okay.
and overwhelmed. Like,
Mm,
I think part of it is how we interpret the little girl. Like she's meant to, or at least my interpretation meant to look like Ella. So is it
mhm,
either a younger version of herself or some kind of projection of a different self?
mhm,
I'm trying to read into kind of like a trauma narrative and think that kind of the death or passing of her mother has split her into kind of a younger
mm,
self that can relive, or not relive, but like work through a trauma she experienced when she was young. And that's when I
sure.
really think of kind of, is this story meant to make her confront some kind of trauma that involved being objectivized visually and then touched, and then I don't know what the eaten alive means, but like, this progression of, the 3 visits, and
Right, right, right.
why like Ella keeps trying to run away from that, but then is forced to kind of engage with it in an uncomfortable way.
Jen, do you have any words or thoughts on like how you would describe Ella as a character?
It's probably similar to Mike's, but
Okay.
thinking passive. Um, and I do think this one's going to sound strange, but I actually think talented,
Hmm.
not with like ideas, not being able to come up with narratives or ideas on her own, but actually like she is good at stop
Yeah,
motion when she's directed. So
yeah.
I think that she's visually talented, but maybe not like doesn't have the ideas for it.
Yeah. Jen, passive is the word that I have next on my outline. Like that's the word I would use for her. I think that she like and actually you've just basically read out my whole next paragraph for me. So thank you. Um so she's an artist. She possesses all the skills of an artist, but throughout the movie she's forced to execute the vision of multiple creative masters, right? There's her mother, of course, early in the film. We've got what I'm going to just call capitalism in the form of Polly's animation studio. And then, of course, there is the little girl who she meets in her apartment. And I think it's pretty clear throughout the movie that the little girl is her like own creative force, like personified, right? But in that personification, it's also externalized, creating like a distinction between Ella's creative urges and like perhaps the rest of Ella's psyche, right? There's a distinction there. So just to break down the three sort of like puppet masters, as I've pointed out, her mother has this limited agency due to her arthritis, but uses Ella to compensate for it. Our opening shots of the film feature the mother dictating like minuscule movements of puppets to Ella, illustrating the extent of maybe her micromanaging tendencies, especially regarding creative endeavors. And as we've already pointed out, she calls Ella puppet throughout the film, right? Emphasizing like the nature of that relationship. The creative child is like a little bit different, right? She doesn't have the same bark that the mother does. Like the mother is like very like mean to her right before the stroke, right? But the creative child is no less demanding. She forces Ella to engage in like maladaptive, antisocial behavior in service of her movie, right? And she forces Ella to fixate on her own mortality in an allegory like about the Ashman to the detriment of her own psychological health, I would say. This is Ella's psychological health. Yeah, and she just like, if Ella tries to stray away from her, she just uses her own absence as a consequence. And Ella, without her inspiration, she like can't handle that. And then of course the man, right? Like the animation studio they just want to exploit Ella's talent and skills. They want to steal her content. Like just notice that none of these allow Ella any opportunity for agency in creative things, right? She genuinely seems to want to make, right? She wants to be a creative person, but in the end, I think she chooses to follow the child's creative vision, like maybe because it's like the closest to her own agency being a part of her, even if externalized, you know? I want to pause here and just get reactions. I don't want to just blather on.
First of all, for you not being able to like come up with an analysis, that's like very cohesive.
Well,
So,
that's because this is the third draft.
all right, well, fair enough.
I want to explore a little bit about kind of this view of passivity versus lack of agency, because they're not necessarily the same thing. And like, I feel like that's what Ella struggles with. Like she has these moments of being like declarative, like I'd rather die than work in commercial, right? Or something like that. Or like she has very, very much an idea of what it means to be an artist. And like she aspires to that. And even when she resists her inspiration, because now as you say it, I'm viewing the young girl as like her pure externalized inspiration. And if she's afraid of it, when she shies away, she still can't get away from it. And so it's kind of, she's an agent, or the inspiration has agency. She's a slave to that, but she tries to fight against it. It's not necessarily passive, but she doesn't succeed. So what does that mean, that she cannot fight all of these things that are controlling her?
No, I mean, I guess I don't have a concrete answer for you there, because one of the earliest questions I had about this movie, which like immediately after watching it upon like the first viewing, was like, where is Ella? We see so much of the external influences on Ella that like what she actually wants, it feels a bit obscured to me.
It's almost like the outside things tell us who Ella is throughout the movie.
Exactly. She wants self-definition, but she only finds self-definition by these other things defining her,
Yeah, like, well, that actually is interesting because I feel like that goes with her, like, quote unquote, not feeling like she has a voice. Like, it's like she doesn't have a self in a way. Like, she knows certain things about herself. She wants that to be a fine artist, that she doesn't want to be, doing commercial art, and that she wants to do stop motion. But why any of those things? Because those are just the things that her mother did. So, like, is that even who she is.
That's
I mean,
legit.
it's interesting when the girl asks her why she does stop motion. She says, "Because I'm good at it." Like that was one of like her reasons. It's like, oh, it's something I can do, and therefore, like, I
Mm,
should do this or pursue this.
yeah.
I'm thinking now of kind of this underlying thematic narrative of rebirth, right? Like now that the mother has passed, she has the space to kind of emerge and find her voice, but how does she pursue that? Or even heavy-handedly how like the very first image we see in the film is this like blue egg-shaped thing, and then
Hmm.
later on in the film we see it crack and emit this red ooze, which is like what's happening there? Is the
Right.
egg dying? Is it? I don't know.
Right.
But it's just like, okay, so she has the space and time to be creative, but she doesn't know what to do. Just like when,
Right.
Tom is like, oh, why don't you make your own film? She's like, because I can't.
Right, right, and yeah, and that's how I had interpreted that egg imagery as well. Like I really feel like I think part of what slipped me up trying to interpret this movie was how much irony there is, right? How much sort of circular and contradictory and paradoxical thinking there is in this movie, right? Like what she's giving birth to there is the concept of death, I think, right? Like when that egg cracks open and reveals the red interior, right? It's the same red that we find on the inside of the bungalow that the Ashman visits. And it's so there's just this real sense of paradox and irony to it that I think we're kind of touching on here by asking about how is she to find a sense of self-definition? How is she to find a sense of identity outside of her mother? And I think that's part of what's interesting about this movie.
I was literally just going to ask you guys what you thought of the egg. And I'm
Hmm.
so happy that both of you had interpretations because it's like the one thing that I was struggling to like interpret in the movie.
Mm,
Because, like, technically, the Ashman, when it becomes big and is chasing little stop motion her
hmm.
through the wall.
Right. It
um,
poops it out of its mouth and it
Yeah, and
fits it
then
in her
feeds it
mouth.
to
Yeah.
her. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I like there's like an element of rebirth and death in there, but I was also like, my brain can't.
I have an interesting read on that moment
Ooh,
because
good. Okay.
because I feel like that blue egg, that scene kind of translucent or whatever, seems very fragile, right? Whereas that like concrete egg that he feeds her seems like a heavy object, right? He just
Mm,
creates it. So it's kind of like playing on that shape of, is the egg something that can kind of give you rebirth, or is it something that ties you down to whatever it's
mm,
tying you down to? Is it a stone? And I think the alternative imagery with the stone versus the egg comes up a lot in kind of the idea of Cyclops, right? Cyclops in the Odyssey puts a big stone and seals off Odysseus and all of his men in a cave, right? And he has to get around that stone. Medusa turns people into stone, right?
Oh,
Little Red Riding Hood in the Grimm fairy tale, like when the Hatchet Man like rescues the grandmother and Riding Hood, fills the wolf with stones so that the wolf can't
mm.
chase them.
Oh shit.
And so like him feeding her the stone is anchoring her to maybe the story that is unfolding with the Ashman.
Oh my
Just a
God,
thought.
that's so dope. I
I
love that
was
so much.
I did not know the Grimm fairy tale Little Red Riding Hood, but that I kind of love that because it's like
Hmm.
he's filling her with the stone. I mean, it's only one, but
Hmm. Oh man. So can I return to my
Sorry.
little
oh
thing
yeah.
on my no no I love what's happening and
I
I'm
mean, you asked
absolutely
us a
going to
question.
I did. I asked you a question, and I am going to find a way to keep all of that because it was incredible. When we left off, dear listeners, we're talking about the three kind of puppet masters that Ella has to respond to. We've got the mother, the creative child, the man. I wanted to talk about the child's movie for a second, right? The movie that she inspires Ella to create instead of finishing her mother's work, right? Clearly an allegory about mortality, I think. in which the protagonist's lack of agency is a key driving tension of the story, right? The protagonist is pursued by an ash man in the woods. Um, and she comes upon a house wherein she hides for 3 nights, each representing like an increasing closeness to death, right? First, it sees her, an event which coincides with the adoption of the new film from her mother's old one. Then it touches her as she begins to like cross moral lines making this movie. And then finally, of course, it consumes her, which is something that not even her creative drive is able to foresee. So much of this movie is our narrator bouncing from puppet master to puppet master in search of genuine expression that doesn't require delving her own agony, right? Like I see so much of like her bouncing from her mother to the corporate world to her genuine expression to, you know, like, and all these like back and forths is all about like not facing what she doesn't want to face about mortality.
You know, why does it have to be so dramatic in terms of death? Like by all accounts, Ella's young. Why should she even worry about her own mortality? And if anything, you know, is she processing her mother's mortality, or is she celebrating that? Or like she won't even live in that house anymore? But is it also the death of creativity? Is that what we're talking about from an artistic point of view?
Yeah.
And one thing I'll offer is you know, arts as a historical perspective, right? Because, you know, you'll view the masters as fine art classics, you know, in the canon. But back in the day, they were all commercial. They worked for kings, queens, churches,
Sure.
right? And so like a lot of art and how it's commissioned or created historically is about power and privilege. It's about who has the money. You know, you go to a museum now and it's like, oh, this exhibit's sponsored by Deutsche Bank, right? Because the banks have the money now, not the
Yeah, right.
churches or the kings or
Right.
queens, right?
Right.
And it's you know, you got your money while you can. You know, one of the things that struck me is when she was going down to that bar to go watch stop motion memes or whatever, is that like if you watch it in closed captions, someone was talking about like working with their dad, right? And very much Ella is working with her mom. So like they have this privilege of a generation that supports them so that they can pursue their art. And that's not common.
No, that is not common. That's very true. No, it reminds me a little of my experience in grad school with fine art. I was illustration undergrad, but fine art grad school, I was like the only one who had a job and who didn't come from money. And almost everyone there was like a trust fund baby. You know, like they were like, oh, my parents bought me a studio in Fishtown or whatever. And it's like, like very few people have that privilege.
Yeah.
And so like the generational thing also, it's sort of frustrating actually to know that Ella is so like dour and like down on herself because she has a lot of privilege in the art world. She also has this connection to a lot of other people doing stop animation. So I
Yeah.
feel like she's,
You can imagine a real universe where she's got it made in the shade, right? Where she's like being
yeah.
handed a real career
Mhm.
making genuine art for an actual consuming audience, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like she's the daughter of this famous person. People would know, be like, oh, it's like her name, like she could probably
Yeah.
reach out to a gallery and they'd be like, yeah, sure, we love your
Yeah.
mother. Show us what you have.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's so funny when she calls her boyfriend out, being like, "You're not a musician, you work a day job." And I'm
Right.
like, "But you don't have to." Like, Ella,
Yeah.
Right.
like, you're lucky.
I think we are supposed to be a little bit critical of Ella for her absolutism there. You
Okay.
know, like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that we are supposed to say, like, well, hold on a minute. You know, most people can't most people have to be weekend warriors. You know, most people have to
yeah, yeah.
um the thing that Mike that you brought up that I really want to touch on also, you brought up this question of um you know, like where does the art come from, right? Like and this idea of like, you know, it's the wealthy people who are able to commission the art historically speaking. And I want to like just take a sidestep and talk about like a philosophical idea of art that came up for me because you also asked the question of like why is it about mortality? Why is it about, you know, Ella is nowhere is young. Why is she so fixated on this question? Because I do think that her story about the Ashman is like an unmistakable allegory about it's like an unmistakable memento mori, right? It made me think about the idea of all genuine art making stemming from a feeling of wanting to supersede your own death, wanting to put something out into the world that will live beyond you, right? Which is something that the mother explicitly says. In the beginning, she says, "All I want is to finish this film before I die." In that line, there is the presupposition that even though she dies, this expression of hers will carry on into the future. And I just feel like it made me wonder to what extent is all art making, regardless of your age, about trying to cheat death.
That's great.
Mhm.
And if I could ask something unprecedented, could I take a quick bathroom break?
Oh my God, me too. Awesome. So I'm just gonna wrap up my thoughts here, if I may. So she's bouncing, as you may recall, she's bouncing from puppet master to puppet master, trying to avoid having to confront her sort of inner demons with this whole mortality thing, which we've talked about is, maybe appropriate given some of her experiences, right? She just watched her mom have like a really serious like brush with mortality. Perhaps all genuine art expression is about confronting your own mortality. Who knows, right? So choosing her inner creative child, though, I think in the end, like illustrates her ironic thinking. It's the closest she can get to genuine agency, but this attempt at self-creation is ironically an act of suicide, right? Like the more she makes the art, the more it actually hurts her to a literal extent, right? The pain caused by her art becomes literal and life-threatening in that drawn-out brutal self-surgery scene. She extracts a muscle of her own, which is symbolic of movement and agency, and transfers it to her film's protagonist. I think it's a resignation and a desire that through her art, this literal piece of her flesh will attain some life, since making art is, as she defines it, bringing dead things to life early in the film. What's interesting about this, I think, is that it's just more severance and externalization, similar to that creative spirit, right? The creative spirit was a severance from the rest of her psyche. This muscle is a severance from the rest of her body. And the thing is, it doesn't make it her, right? It's not like in contributing this muscle to her art, which will live on, she will actually like cheat death in a way, right? And of course, it's this final desperate act that's going to kill her in the end because she bleeds out. In that final scene, we view from the now life-size bungalow that Ella is snapping shots. And I had to watch this twice to see what was actually happening, but she's in the end there that we see on the computer. She's snapping shots on her set by controlling her camera from her phone as she bleeds out on the ground, shooting even into the final moments of her existence. So, like, her inert body and expressionless face, again, continue to illustrate that puppetness, right? As does her final imagined act of getting back into the box predicted by her mother in that imagined hospital conversation. I mean, I think that the message overall in general is just in order to make genuine art, the artist has to endure their inner pain, making themselves the puppet to their inner creativity, right? It's an artist as vessel message. As an artist myself, as someone who makes art, and Jen, maybe you can speak to this a bit. How do you feel about the concept of like that artist as vessel? The idea that like art is something, or the inspiration to make art is something that is external to the artist. It's like given to us by some sort of higher power, right? The Greeks would have said it was the muse, right? In the modern day, people there are a lot of people, and I've been spoken to as a songwriter by people about this, seeming to like talk about like some sort of mysticism with creating art. Like there's just this sense of like another realm that it acts upon you in a way. Like, and I wonder what you feel about that.
I've heard a lot of people say that. Or a muse is still a word that's used. Like a lot of
Hmm.
people still use that.
I think it's a
Um,
useful metaphor, but yeah, continue. Yeah.
yeah, no. I think that no, I believe that it takes like you might have like natural like talent. Like,
Mhm.
some people are just have that from the start, but I think
Right.
that even with that, like it takes practice and time and you have to like train yourself. I don't think that someone just gives you the things. I think that like um it feels a little like I don't know, like
Hmm.
I can't think of the word. But yeah, I would say no, I don't believe that. Do you believe that? Because I know you're an artist, you're a songwriter. How do you feel?
No, I don't either. I think it's horse shit. I just like,
Okay, all
but
right,
I
good. Because I
just
was like, oh no, I'm saying this, and Harry's going to be like, well, I
no,
do.
no. What I'm saying is that like I just feel like this movie does so much to externalize creative inspiration
Yeah.
that I feel like it almost. I'm not sure what it says about that idea, but I feel like it's addressing it in some way.
I mean, is it critiquing it because it's basically saying she's still as slavishly devoted to that as she was to her mother, so
I
that
think so.
paradigm
Yeah.
is no different.
I
Hmm.
think
Um,
so. I think we're supposed to feel like it's really no, like just as her mother lays out, right? You are a puppet caught in your own strings. If it's not me pulling them, it's somebody else, right? And so like even her own creative inspiration is that externalized force. It's pulling her along.
to return to a question you'd posed a moment ago, the question of superseding death
Hmm.
or getting at the concept of legacy. I think that's
Hmm.
always been part and parcel of art in thinking
Hmm.
about, why make art? Why is stuff recorded? Why is stuff passed on? I think the Greeks even thought about this a lot in the Iliad. Like the whole thing was about, does Achilles enter the war at the risk of dying, or does he just stay immortal? And like whatever. And the message was, well, if you die in battle, then you'll be immortal anyway. So you don't
Right,
need to
right. That's
physically
right.
be
Yeah.
immortal. Um, and so yeah, I take your point, Suzanne, talking about like just needing to finish the film before I die. But like why? Why is the Cyclops piece better than anything
Hmm.
else?
Hmm.
It's interesting, like we don't really ever get to hear why it's the Cyclops piece either, because we get that she's like interested in Greek mythology. We just don't hear her thoughts on it. Like it's kind of interesting. We really don't know much about the mother except through other people, kind of.
No, but something that I thought was interesting about the Cyclops piece versus Ella's piece that she started creating, with her externalized creative force, but really it's all her, right? Um, is that the Cyclops story is similar to Ella's story, a memento mori, right? It's a reminder of death, but the Cyclops story has more agency in it, right? Because in the story of the Cyclops, she at least has the agency to give an eye to foresee her destiny. Whereas in the story of the child and the Ash Man and all that, it's so Red Riding Hoodie. It's so all you can do is hide in this bungalow and watch as this thing comes and visits upon you, right?
Oh, but wait, the Cyclops sees its own death just as Ella is capturing her own death and the
Hmm.
camera, and we, the viewer, see her death, right?
Yes.
So is it
Mm,
bringing us into being complicit in this, being
fuck.
supportive of? No, no, no.
Um, I feel like I feel like we should maybe rate it.
So I am still defining success and failure of a film by whether or not it conveys a coherent thematic message. I've changed the number that is, right? I think I'm gonna go to match you, and like 5+ is on the good side, and under 5 is on the bad side. So
Okay, cool.
it's a 1 to 10. I'm giving up the whole school. I don't know why I wanted to like make it about like school grades and like a 6.5 is a D and like a 7 is a C. Like, fuck that. So I apologize to you. I apologize to all of our listeners who are trying to like figure out what I think about movies.
We need to change it on them enough to make sure that they're listening.
That's right, just to make sure you're paying attention.
Yeah,
so
they're on a quiz. I don't know.
Right.
All right, so 1 through 10, and 5 is like
lukewarm water.
10 is like the best thing you've ever seen, and 1 is like the worst thing you've ever seen.
I want to give this a 7. Keeping in mind that means something different than the last 7 I gave, right? Which was like, I'm so sorry, everybody. The last 7 I gave was like barely passing, but like this 7 means like it's not only sufficient, but like venturing into good territory here. Like, I think it's like, I really liked it. I actually really liked it as a movie. Like, I don't think it's a classic film and that it will be remembered forever, but I do think that it is cool. And I think so there's a lot of negativity about this movie on the internet. And I think that the reason for that is because it says something very niche. It's about art making and artistry. And for just the general schmo who doesn't do that, or who doesn't really consider that or think about that, there's not a lot to relate to here. But I it felt poignant to me. It felt like it really delivered for me. So I liked it a lot.
So I do want to say, I'll rate it next, but I do want to say on that note, I do think that people also, I think the horror community is divided amongst things that are surreal and weird, and then things that are like,
like concrete. Yes.
Concrete. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
The thing that I always think about is like Rob Zombie. Like, I love Lords of Salem, but it is the least favorite among fans, and a lot of fans viscerally hate it. And surreal, and like his best, like weirdest fucking film. But then he went back to all his other shit that he normally does to please the fans. So I feel like this is like a surreal, weird film, and so because of that, this gets a 9 from me.
God damn, a 9.
Wow. Fucking loved it. The only other 9 I've given on this podcast was Skinamarink. So I loved it. I think it had the perfect ending. It knew exactly where to end. It did not have 500 endings. It did not have 500 beginnings. It was cohesive. It was visually like disturbing. I love the stop animation. The director, Robert Morgan, I think is his name. Yeah, Robert Morgan. I was thrilled when I found out that he also did Cat with Hands, because I love Cat with Hands. It's fucking weird. And so like, I'm very excited to see what he does next. I was reading interviews with him. He is like very much like into the macabre and weird, and he has this whole like necromancy like thing with like stop animation, like how it's alive and dead at the same time. So I'm just like, it's about art, and I love that. But yeah, this is a 9, 100% a 9 for me.
Damn. It's a strong stance to take.
Mike, what do you give it?
Wow, I feel terrible now, because when I rate things, I'm usually overly generous. Like, my Yelp reviews are like, it sucked, but I'm still gonna give it 5 stars because I'm nice or whatever. I'm coming in with bias because I'm not a horror advocate. I'm not, well, first, don't have the vocabulary. I will say that, it held my attention. I thought it was artistically well done. I mean, I was coming in intending to give it a solid 5. And criteria's changed up a bit on me now, because it's no longer just a personal thing, but more of a statement. I mean, I could be convinced to give it a 6, but I'm still in that territory.
That's just me. That you don't have to do that. Yeah.
You don't have to rate it like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I still think for me, I guess it was a 5 because I felt like the messaging was very heavy-handed. It wasn't so much showing as telling, like having dialogue being like, you're a puppet, you have strings. I'm like, you can
Mm,
color puppet throughout and then like do other things, but then like come back to it over and over again and
to
like
have that,
reinforce
yeah.
that. Or to have someone commercialize the art and be like, you're stealing it, or I'm in control. I'm just like, maybe symbolism wise or storytelling wise, that's on,
Hmm.
I'm not a filmmaker by
Hmm.
any means, but
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't feel like, I felt like it was a lot of telling you things. It was
Yeah.
beautiful artistically, and I guess like, I don't have criteria for judging horror films or appreciating elements of that, but it didn't gross me out, held my attention,
Hmm.
um, would never rewatch it.
So the other thing we do, which is going to be
Oh,
really hard with this movie,
oh, sure
is
is.
we
I have
bring.
my answer.
Oh my God, nice. Great,
Nice.
great, the
Perfect.
hottest. So yeah, okay, Mike, I feel like you should go first then because I still don't know.
Oh, I was waiting to kind of be like the twist or whatever, but
Oh no, okay,
I'm
all right.
leading straight off with Mother Cyclops. I think
Mother
it
Cyclops is the hottest for you?
yeah. It doesn't have to be a human, right? Like, are we opening like new frontiers here? Because like,
Well, yeah, let's go. Let's go.
Yeah, let's do it.
I just like the big gaspy, like, yeah.
So wait, are we talking like, just have to clarify, the Cyclops, a
the chick
Cyclops,
The
like,
moving around,
okay,
right.
but the mother, like,
No. I think Mike means
or the actual
the
Cyclops?
the
felt
Cyclops. Yeah,
Cyclops.
Just checking.
because Suzanne or somebody refers to it as the Mother Cyclops, and I'm like, at first we don't know what the other Cyclops is, but it's apparently herself too. So there are two of them. So I guess between them, the one that's standing.
Oh my God.
Can
And
you, Mike? I need you to justify this
Yeah,
for me,
yeah,
elaborate.
please.
I will explicate it
Go
because
ahead.
like this
Yeah.
is a very sensory film, right? We get touches and feels and images, and like the soft focus that opens the film is the head of the Cyclops, right?
Mm.
And it's seeing it moved around, poised, positioned, and there's something that connects you immediately with this. Um, I will also add for the rebirth egg imagery throughout. It's an egg-shaped head. It's not like a normal shaped head. Um, and I think that goes in with it as well. But I feel like the Cyclops had an interesting story in insofar as you pointed out, like there's a stand-in for Ella and what it means to kind of toy with seeing your future, having a vision of how things can play out, but also being puppeteered in a certain way. Um, or maybe I'm a furry after at the end of the day, and like I like soft surfaces and stuff like that. But like I don't know. I think we keep coming back to this expression of surprise and like there's something heartfelt about every time that Cyclops is
Mm.
captured on camera. I don't know.
All right.
All right, Harry, you got to go next because I
I
still don't.
have to go next.
Well, I mean,
There are like five other characters that are
I'll go
real.
next. I'll go next. And listen, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna say Ella.
why? I feel like it's the most obvious choice.
It makes
I have
sense.
to go with.
Listen, she I think that she is willing to cross lines. You know what I mean?
Honestly, I was not weirded out by any of that necrophilia stuff with the fox or
With
whatever.
the
Oh
fox
no,
or
It was fine.
murdering her boyfriend and using their bodies in the you weren't bothered by
It's
any of
fine.
that?
It's
the
fine.
Yeah.
sister kind of
I mean,
deserved
I would
it.
say Tom had a chance, but he has a terrible hairdo.
Yeah, yeah,
I think what
exactly.
I'd like I think if I, if I was to make a pass on any character in this movie, it would have been Ella, sort of like mid movie. Like I don't want to get murdered, but I am interested in the sort of unhinged, like slightly unhinged, artist, ethos. I don't know,
So you want like on the verge of madness, but not like.
but not fully like I'm gonna get choked in the night. That's where I'm
Okay.
at.
I'm trying to remember all the characters. Yeah, the boyfriend, I can never remember his face. Born. Tom. Sister was too skinny for me. I feel like I feel like I'm Oh, wait, I was going to say Ella, but I was thinking the fox thing. That didn't weird me out because it's taxidermy essentially.
Yeah.
Mhm. I think I'll go with Ella. I think I'll go with Ella.
Mm-hmm.
But do I want her on the madness side, or I feel like I'm gonna go like before she goes mad. Yeah, I can like get out of it easier once I
Yeah,
see
well,
it
I
coming.
don't want her into madness. I'm just saying, like, like pre-madness, just approaching for me. Yeah. Where's the dick?
There was no dick.
There is a dick.
There is a dick?
Yeah,
What?
it's the Ashman. The Ashman is the dick.
Oh, but I thought like you meant literal dick. Did the Ashman
No,
have a
Like,
dick?
he doesn't have a dick, but he's a dick. First of all, he's the. I know that not all men have dicks, but he's the Ashman. First of all, second of all, it just is so intrusive as a character, right? He is so yeah. He butts himself in where he's not welcome, right? He's the man that nobody wants to meet.
I
It's the
like that he's
Ashman.
a dick because he butts himself in where he doesn't like belong.
Yeah,
That's
exactly. All right. Do we have any other thoughts that we want to express about this film or
I had a whole thing about like rape, but like,
go on.
please, yes.
I still feel like the way Ella's trauma is presented is through some kind of serialization of rape, where you're first objectified, you're seen, then you're touched
Mm-hmm.
involuntarily, and then like it consumes you mentally.
Mm-hmm.
Like you are traumatized by that
Mm-hmm.
action. You feel dirty, sullied, and whatnot. And
Mm-hmm.
whether
Mm-hmm.
it's like a literal rape from your childhood or more metaphorically, like the rape of art by
Mm-hmm.
commercialization or whatever other forces. But that was just something I kept seeing in the whole Ashman thing. Like she couldn't
Mm-hmm.
escape the rape. Like it was always going to happen in a
Right.
way.
Right. Because the Ashman is the dick. I mean, yeah. No, I had also like a like a hot take, if you will, about like addiction
Mm,
too, which I don't think is really really supported by the movie, but I felt I saw some commonalities between the depiction of relationships between artists and their art and other depictions I have seen about, drug addicts and their drug, which is about pursuing the thing that destroys you and, becoming like trying to escape it, but ultimately just kind of finding that alternative reality to the thing that you want is kind of empty and not what you want. So I think it speaks to this story, which is just it's so strange, but can also it's also very versatile. It really can be stretched in a lot of different ways and viewed in a lot of different lights. And for that reason, I really think is one of the best horror movies that I've seen this year, frankly. Mike, thank you so much for joining us on this and providing your insight. This has been a really awesome treat for us.
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
It's
man.
been a pleasure.
Somebody give us a soundbite. We need to finish this up. How are we gonna do it?
Stay in school and pay attention to your 11th grade English class because you might meet your best friend forever.
Perfect.